Hey guys, my name is Kirsty and welcome back to Upside Down Books. Today we're going to be doing a tag. We're going to be doing the mid-year freakout tag.
Non più tra I farfalloni amoroso, notte e giorno di torno.
First of all, let's acknowledge my new friend. This is a lovely little ceramic thing that my parents got me for the snail motif that goes with my name, so I hope you don't have any great adversities to fake snails. I think it's hilarious. It's a snail that's slowly creeping off the edge, so that's gonna be his new place. He's as of yet unnamed, but providing I don't like knock him off, and let's be honest, there is a risk of that, but hopefully not. Hopefully the snail makes it through the video. I don't know, maybe we'll put him, maybe I'll move him each video just for your entertainment, but welcome to the club, Snail. If you have no idea what I'm talking about because you're new here, then my handle over Instagram is OzBooksnail. So I'm a book snail, not a bookworm, because slow reading, although since I've started my account, I would say I'm probably more of a bookworm than a book snail these days, but this is beside the point. Let's get into the video. I think I forgot to do a mid-year freakout or any sort of mid-year check-in tag last year, so I'm making an effort to do it this year. I think these tags are super fun. It's a way to reflect on the 6 months that have gone by and the 6 months that are yet to come for the year in terms of which books I've enjoyed, which books I'm looking forward to, yada yada yada. So there are a few questions which I want to dive into, have a look at with you, and talk about some of the great books I've already read this year. So the first question is, what's your favourite book that you've read so far this year? I'm going to expand this question and answer it with a few books. I've read some really great reads, some reads that have really stuck with me, and so I've got 4 to talk about with you today. And like quite a lot of these I don't own copies of, so obviously I'm going to have to go and remedy that. The first one is Daughter of the Moon Goddess. This was just incredible. I read this like totally serendipitously because one of my friends at work got an advance copy of it and she was like, hey, do you want to read it? And I said, you know what, yes I do, because that one looks really pretty. And so I read it and loved it. I could not get over how good this book was. This is a Chinese or Korean, I can't remember, there's been so many retellings that have come out. I think it's a Chinese mythology reimagining. Could be wrong. In any case, it was just incredible. The dragons, the magic, the myth, just everything that's talked about and hinted about and explored in this story was so much fun, and I cannot recommend it enough if you read YA or if you read fantasy. It is simply a must read. It then have Gideon the Ninth, and I will absolutely be getting myself a copy of this whole series as soon as I can find a copy of it that's not extortionately expensive. Why is this series so expensive? It's so much more expensive than every other YA fantasy. So this is paranormal fantasy. This is just incredible. It's queer. It's amazing. It's so good. I listened to the audiobook. This is actually something I read really recently, and it is skyrocketed up into some of my all-time favorite books. Just straight up possibly the best book I've ever read. I just love this story so much. It's really well done, and the characters, you love to hate them and then you end up loving them, and it's like an enemies to lovers relationship, but it's you and the characters, and it's just, oh, it's so good. If you haven't read Gideon the Ninth, and paranormal stuff, in particular if necromancy is like your thing, then you need to read this. You need to read this book. It is just phenomenal. The next book I do have a copy of, but I don't have a finished copy of, and that is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. This is hilarious. If you are a crime or a mystery Agatha Christie sort of fan and you haven't read this one yet, then literally this should be the next thing you read. This is a really funny and really candid murder mystery where there's a whole family that's a bit dysfunctional, and they go up to a ski resort where they're there to celebrate and be together because the main character's brother has just got out of prison. And the way that those stories interact in terms of why that brother's been in prison and what happens with people sequentially beginning to die in the resort is super spooky. It's very Agatha Christie-esque in terms of who is going to come next, but it's very funny. The way that the narration is done is something you can really get behind, and you're just sort of giggling but also horrified, and it's just it's phenomenal. It's unlike anything I've ever read. Yes, it's like Agatha Christie, but better? Should I say that? Do I say that? I do say that. And the last book I want to talk about, it just wouldn't be a year if a Kate Quinn book didn't make the list, and that's The Diamond Eye. I read this via audiobook, but I went and got a copy of it because Kate Quinn is the new love of my life at the moment. Step aside, Fiona McIntosh. Kate Quinn is here. This is a World War II historical fiction that I loved. It's very gripping. It's very unique. It's about a female sniper in the Russian army during World War II, and it's based off a real story, but the way this is told is phenomenal, and I really feel that it would appeal to any Americans in the audience tonight, because this is intertwining a story with Eleanor Roosevelt and the sniper, who did actually have a relationship in real life, so it's got your nice White House storyline tied into it. But for people who don't care so much about the American side of it, it is still just an incredible war story, and Kate Quinn writes like no one else does. The next question is, what's the best sequel you've read so far this year? And I'm going to start off with Starsight by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in the Skywards trilogy, and oh, it's so good. I think I don't really need to elaborate on the fact that Brandon Sanderson is a very good author, and this is a very, like, I want to call it cantankerously hilarious book. And it's just, it really lives up to book 1. So if you enjoyed book 1 and you haven't continued the series yet, same vibes, but better, but cooler, but more interesting. So this is just a big thumbs up from me. And of course, given that I'm reading Outlander at the moment, I would have to say that Written in My Own Heart's Blood, which is the book I'm up to, have just finished, which is book 8, was also like a fantastic sequel to have read this year. It's huge, it's amazing. I've got 1 book to go to catch up with the series now, and if you haven't read Outlander and you like historical fiction, you need to read Outlander. If the books are scaring you because they're huge, do the audiobooks because they are brilliant. They're also very long, but they're very brilliant. This was probably one of my favorite books that we've had in this series for quite some time. Whilst I love everything Diana Gabaldon writes, I did think that there was just a little something special about this book that really made it amazing. The next question is new releases that you really want to read but you haven't got to yet. Now, I could get a very extensive list going for this one, but I'm going to whittle it down for you. So for this question, I've got 3 books I want to talk about. The first one, I don't know if it still counts as a new release, but I'm going to count it as a new release, and that is Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. This is a sci-fi that I've heard endless good things about, which I talked about recently in a book haul, and I am so keen to dive into this one. So this is a pretty recent addition to my TBR, so I'm not too, like, berating of myself that I haven't got to it yet, but I'm very much so looking forward to it. The next book is a non-fiction book called This Is Not a Book About Benedict Cumberbatch by Tabitha Carvin. I picked this one up because it had Benedict Cumberbatch on the cover in name, and because I've heard quite a number of good things about this just being quite a joyful read, so I'm really keen to pick this one up. I keep forgetting that I have it though, in amongst all the chaos of my TBR, so I need to remember that this exists and that I can read it whenever I so wish to. And the final book is probably one of my most anticipated, or at least most hyped books for the year, and that is I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. And I just haven't got there. Like, as soon as this came out, I was like, obviously I need this book, and I was so excited to read it, and it came out maybe like a handful of months ago now, but have I got to it yet? No, I haven't. It's not even particularly big, but I'm hoping that there'll be some sort of lull in my reading and like all the things I perceive there to be pressure about for me to read sooner, so that I can actually get around to reading this one, because goodness me, I do love her writing. The next question is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I always get stumped by this question because I feel like I'm really prepared for the first half, but less so for the second half. However, something that is like imminently about to be released is Horse by Geraldine Brooks. I really love Geraldine Brooks, but I don't really have any good reason to have such a claim on that passion. She's an author I fell in love with. I think she's probably one of the first authors I read of the historical fiction genre when I was a little bit younger, in my mid-teens, and I read the People of the Book, and that is a really cool story and a really well structured story, and so I've been really excited about collecting and reading all of her other books. I've not actually read anything else by Geraldine Brooks. My mum has, and I think I'm just like riffing off her vibes because she's saying that they're great, so I'm like, well, it's gonna be good then. But I am really excited about Horse. This is a horse racing sort of historical fiction, which is like such a random direction to have gone in, but I love it and I'm all there for it. I don't know what it is, but I feel like I've just been reading so many books and or reading about so many books that are about horse racing, and it's given me a real like thing about Phar Lap, which is a famous Australian racehorse, which I actually got to see. He is taxidermied and on display at the Melbourne Museum, and that was really cool to see. But anyway, this has all just like been this weird piling up of excitement where I feel like the universe is just like getting me hyped for a book about horse racing, which otherwise would not be of any great interest to me. But that's beside the point. This is coming out in like late June or early July, and I can't wait. I'm so excited to pick it up. I am planning to go on a little book shopping trip because I don't have enough books to go and get this in the near future. The other one I want to talk about is Bloodmarks, which is the sequel to Legendborn by Tracy Dion. What is this? It's like an Arthurian legend retelling fantasy in the YA category, and it's just phenomenal, and I really, really love book 1, and I think it's probably one of the sequels I've been most looking forward to, and I've had to wait such a long time for. There are other sequels coming out at the end of the year that I am excited for, such as the sequel to A River Enchanted, and so on and so forth, but those are the 2 that really come to mind. The next question is your biggest disappointment, and there is one book that immediately came to mind that I read really recently, and that is Neom by Lavi That author, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, Tidhar. This one is actually not coming out until September and is something I read from NetGalley, and I just was so excited about it going off the cover and the blurb, and it like hardcore crashed for me. This was just not my thing, not my cup of tea. Mayday, mayday, back out and leave that author alone. That is a big flag for me to say this author's not for me. It might be for someone else, but it's not for me. So that's been my biggest disappointment of the year so far, and I think my only 1-star read as of yet. So to do the flip side of that, the next question is, what's your biggest surprise? And I've actually got a few for this question that I want to talk about. The first one is actually a book I read for work, which is called 90 Packets of Instant Noodles. This is by Deb Fitzpatrick, and this was really great. I don't usually review or talk about books that I read for work, and this is a book I read for work, but I was genuinely really blown away and enjoyed this one, so I just wanted to give a quick shout out to say that this was a good surprise and maybe you should go and read it. The next book, and probably the biggest surprise this year, has been The Nurse's War by Victoria Perman. I was excited, or maybe excited is too strong of a word, but I was really keen to pick this one up. I got sent this for review and I thought, oh, this sounds interesting, but it also just doesn't look like my thing, not particularly. And it's huge. It's a huge and hefty read and it took me a while to get through, but it has been one of my favorite books this year. I have a whole review for this put up. I was really blown away by this, so if you want to hear more about my thoughts then you can go and watch that video, but this book was just this, I really connected with this book and the writing. It was very emotional, it was beautiful, it captures World War I so perfectly from the female perspective, and I cannot recommend it enough. And the last book for that question I want to talk about is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I actually listened to the audiobook of this because I've got this copy and I think I do have 1 or 2 other copies. You just end up collecting a lot of the classics. And yeah, wow. I was not a fan of Pride and Prejudice, and it had really put like a bad stink on classics for me for like 10 years. I have been procrastinating reading classics ever since reading Pride and Prejudice. I found it so hard to read. And so I've been a little bit hesitant, but slowly, like book by book, I've been reading classics that I've been really enjoying. I feel like there's so much discussion around classics and like the pressure around reading them, and sort of like the reverse side of being like, you don't have to read the classics to be a reader, and like obviously you don't, but it's made me feel like, why would I waste my time reading the classics? And I feel like I'm slowly coming to the realization that they're classics for a reason and they're really quite good. The audiobook is narrated by Rosamund Pike, who plays Jane in the Keira Knightley version of Pride and Prejudice, so if you like her as an actress then I recommend listening to it. I definitely want to read this one day. I feel like doing these kinds of things via audiobook first helps you get the intonation and the nuances and the subtleties in tone and delivery that you wouldn't get if you're not a classic reader and familiar with these things otherwise. So I'm looking forward to reading this again in the future, knowing a little bit more about like how things were said, because I love this story so much. The next question is favourite new to you author, and that would have to be Tasmin Muir. That is the author of Gideon the Ninth, which just, yeah, taken me by storm. So anything that Tasmin Muir has written, is going to write, will be something that I will be reading. The next question is your newest fictional crush, and I always find this question a little bit hard to come up with an answer for, but I managed to put together a list of 3 characters. The first one being Gideon. Gideon being female and me not being gay, but there we go, she's on the list because how can you not have a crush on Gideon? She's just amazing. The second one being Valak. I don't know if this counts because he's not a new to me crush, and he is one of the main characters in Poison Study, but I reread it for the first time in nearly 10 years, so I'm gonna count him as like a rediscovered old crush because Valak is Valak. And the last one is Henry from Addie LaRue. I'm not going to say anything more about Addie LaRue because like so much mystery and intrigue surrounding that story, but definitely Henry makes the list. My newest favourite character, and I think for this one I would pick Jin Yin, whose name I still don't really know how to say. That's the main character from Daughter of the Moon Goddess. Phenomenal, strong, amazing female who I wish I could be. Need I say more? The next question is books that made you cry, and I've had a few tearjerkers this year so far. The first one is obviously going to be The Nurse's War. Like, there is so much emotion in this book. I cried quite a lot. There's just a lot of really highly strong moments and high intensity moments where like emotion is just seeping out of the narrative, and it's incredible. Cried in all the good ways. Yeah, just get a box of tissues ready if you're gonna read this book. The next one is Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Laurie Gottlieb, and one day I will learn to say her name. But this one surprised me because as much as it's a self-help book that like looks indicative of tears and is like about psychology and how we present in therapy and blah blah blah, I wasn't actually expecting this to be quite so invested as it was, because you get like micro narratives in this where she's following like these patients that she's sort of fictionalized and amalgamated from her own experiences, because this is non-fiction, and like following some of the sad stories through was very sad, and I definitely had a little cry towards the end. That is all I will say about this. And lastly, if you've read it, you know. I don't know how many of you will have read it yet because it's new, but like there's a scene, there's a character, there's a death. And even in the context of war, so sad. I felt really bad because the next question was a book that made you happy, and I had to think like so hard because I was like, I don't know, I don't read any happy books. Do I read any feel-good books? I'm literally doing a reading prompt this year, and one of them is like a feel-good book, and I'm like, I don't think I read feel-good books. But I did come up with 2 titles. The first one I'm absolutely putting Sense and Sensibility on there because this is such a wholesome and wonderful story, and it's also quite like a female empowerment story, and I mean anything written by Jane Austen naturally is, but yeah, I don't know, I want it to be spring and I want to reread this. Maybe when it gets warmer I will sit outside and reread it because it's winter in Australia right now, for anyone who got confused by that comment. I need to read more Jane Austen. But the second and probably more like logical pick is How to Train Your Dragon. Like, amazing, hilarious, couldn't laugh enough. This book made me joyously happy. Although I do think there was a moment where I was like, did I cry in this book as well? I can't wait to read the rest of the series. I have read books 1, 2, and 3 out of 5,800,000 of them, but I am planning to finish the series, and it's a good laugh and it's funny. Like, how can you not get behind Hiccup? He's hilarious. Okay, and the next question was the most beautiful book you've bought or received this year, and I've got a little stack that we're gonna work our way through. The first one is a special edition of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I can't remember whose edition this is. I don't know if it was a Waterstones one that then like got brought into Australia as well. It's got sprayed edges, it's got lovely end papers, it's got like illustrations throughout. Mwah, it's beautiful. The next one is a potential spoiler for the June Fairy Loot box. Adult only Fairy Loot box, so if you haven't received your latest parcel, it's June of 2022, then skip over the next few seconds because I'm going to show you what that book is. And that is Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. Isn't this gorgeous? It's bright yellow. This is a special cover. You will see this in my book haul as well, so extra preview for you. It's got a lovely quote down here. It's got nice sparkly end papers with it being signed, and gets better. The naked book is the most pretty naked book I have ever had, and it looks like this. It's pink underneath with goats, and it's got nice white and like yellow writing. It's just like, what is not to love about that? I think that's one of my favourites at the moment. I've got to give a shout out to Once Upon a Broken Heart. I mean, this is just such a gorgeous book. And in the same vein as that, also A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross, because she's such a pretty one. Couldn't do this without mentioning the Waterstones edition of Ariadne with the reverse cover colours. I don't know if this has, oh yes, it's got lovely end papers. Got a really nice spine without the jacket on, but like not much else going on, but like the jacket itself is just to die for. This is one of my favorite books. It's so beautiful. And then finally, I thought I'd just give a little shout out to You've Reached Sam, because I think this book is great. Whoever designs this deserves an award. The last question is, what books do you need to read before the end of the year? Now, aside from my whole TBR, there are a few books that are high up on my hit list. There are Sony books that I need to read, and Sony books I've been promising to read, but I think first and foremost would have to be Terrier by Tamora Pierce, because you guys must be sick by now with the number of times I have brought up this book. I do intend to read it. I am trying to read it. We will get there. It will happen by the end of this year. A book that you're possibly even more sick of me talking about is The House of Always by Jen Lyons. Will she ever read it? No one knows, but the next book is out now, so methinks I buy the next book and then read them back to back. That would be so full on. These books are hectic, but like, I need to read this. And the last one that I think is worthy of a mention is book 12 in the Ranger's Apprentice series. 12 book series that I've casually just left with one book to go and not finished off for ages. Like, what's that about? Why would I not finish that? That would be a great achievement. And so that brings us to the end of the video. That is my little mid-year check-in with the mid-year freak-out tag. So if you haven't done this video yet and you would like to consider yourself tagged, let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these, or let me know how your reading has gone so far this year. What has been your favourite book this year? Other than that, I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.